Close your eyes. And picture a night sky without city lights. A sky so black, it feels infinite. So deep, you could lose yourself among the stars. Now imagine that those stars are not just twinkling lights in the distance, but signs, messages, and stories, woven into a cosmic map by people who have watched them for countless generations. Each star is part of a pattern. Each movement a signal. Each shadow cast by the moon is a quiet reminder that the heavens are alive and speaking. Beneath this sky lies a world of warmth and green. A land where rivers coil through thick jungles. Where the air hums with life. And where pyramids rise from the earth like the steps of giants. This is the realm of the ancient Maya. They were not a single people, but a constellation of kingdoms and cities. Each with its own rulers, artisans, and farmers. Yet bound together by a shared vision of the universe. A vision in which the earth, the sky, and human life were all part of the same great story. It is a world of mathematicians who counted centuries into the future. Of architects who built stone temples aligned with the sun. Of farmers who coaxed maize from stubborn earth. And of storytellers who could make the gods themselves seem close enough to touch. The ruins of their cities still stand. Hidden deep in jungles or blazing under the tropical sun. But these are not silent ruins. They are places that still seem to breathe. If you stand quietly enough, you might almost hear the echo of voices. The slow beat of drums. The shuffle of feet gathering in a plaza for a festival long past. Tonight, we will walk there together. We will not hurry. We will take the same slow pace the jungle takes. One step, one breath at a time. We will listen to the past as though it were a lullaby. And let the Mayan world unfold before us like an ancient scroll. So let the worries of the day fade into the distance. Settle in. And let me take you to the land of the Maya. Arrival in the land of the Maya. The first thing you notice is the air. It is warm, almost heavy, as if it carries the weight of centuries in every breath. It smells of earth after rain, dark, rich, and fertile. Mixed with the faint sweetness of orchids hidden high in the trees. Somewhere in the distance, water trickles over stone. A quiet thread of sound weaving through the deeper hush of the forest. The jungle is alive around you. It is not loud, but full of small, deliberate sounds. The rustle of leaves as a lizard darts across them. The distant call of a bird with bright feathers. The almost imperceptible hum of insects hidden in the undergrowth. Every noise feels ancient. As though it has been echoing here for 1,000 years. A narrow path lies before you. Its stones are half swallowed by roots. The edges softened by moss and time. This is no modern trail. It is an ancient causeway. A sakbi, as the Maya called it. Once, it connected great cities. Allowing messengers and merchants to travel for days without losing their way. You step forward. And the world of the present begins to fall away. The light shifts, filtering down through the canopy in gentle patterns. The leaves above catch the sun in flashes of gold and green. Their movement casting rippling shadows across the path. You can feel the stillness settling over you. As if the forest is slowly wrapping you in its quiet embrace. The deeper you walk, the more the air feels like a soft blanket. The ground beneath your feet is uneven. But you sense the weight of history here. So many feet have passed along this same road. Farmers carrying baskets of maize. Traders with obsidian blades glinting in the sun. Priests making their way toward distant temples to perform sacred rites. And then, through the curtain of green ahead, you see it. A pyramid rises into the sky. Its base is broad, anchored firmly in the earth. And its steps climb upward in perfect lines toward a platform crowned by stone. The blocks are massive. Each one shaped and placed by human hands centuries ago. Lichen and moss have claimed the surface. But the edges remain sharp. The form unmistakable. A monument to both faith and skill. You walk closer. Your steps slowing without you realizing. It feels wrong to rush here. Every stone seems to hum with quiet energy. As if the building itself is aware of your presence. Standing before it, you tilt your head back. Above the temple, the sky is an impossible blue. The kind of color that seems endless. You can almost imagine what it must have been like. To stand here centuries ago. With the plaza below filled with people. The air alive with music and voices. And the priests in bright feathered headdresses. Ascending the steps to make offerings to the gods. A breeze stirs the air. And with it comes a feeling. A soft, unspoken welcome. It is not the welcome of a stranger. But the welcome of a place that has been waiting for you to return. You close your eyes for a moment. Listening to the wind move through the jungle leaves. It sounds almost like whispering. Stories drifting on the air. Waiting to be told. And here. In the heart of this ancient land. Your journey into the world of the Maya truly begins. The land and its people. The Maya world was a vast tapestry. Its threads stretched across hundreds of miles. Woven from jungle, mountains, rivers, and sea. It was not one single landscape. But many. Each with its own voice. Its own rhythm. Its own relationship with the people who called it home. If you were to stand at the heart of this realm and slowly turn in a circle, you might see endless lowland forests to the north. Rolling hills and limestone ridges to the west. Towering volcanic mountains to the south. And the shimmer of the Caribbean to the east. The Maya understood this diversity in a way only those who live close to the land can. They didn't merely inhabit their environment. They lived in partnership with it. The lowlands. The northern lowlands, much of the Yucatan Peninsula, were flat, dry, and stony. Here, there were no great rivers cutting through the land. Instead, water lay hidden beneath the surface in vast networks of limestone caves. Some of these caves opened to the world as deep, circular wells known as cenotes. Their waters were cool, blue, and clear. And for the Maya, they were both lifeline and portal to the underworld. In the lowlands, the soil was thin, and farming could be a challenge. Yet the Maya coaxed maize, beans, and squash from it with careful cycles of planting and fallow seasons. They understood when to burn and clear. When to rest the earth. And when to return to it again. In the dry season, they dug reservoirs to catch and hold rainwater. Their edges lined with stone to keep the precious supply from draining away. The highlands. To the south and west rose the highlands. Where mountains split the clouds and the air turned cool and crisp. Here, volcanoes loomed on the horizon. Their dark slopes are fertile with ash. Streams ran clear and cold through valleys. And the earth offered a bounty of crops. Potatoes, chilies, cacao, and maize grew in abundance. The highlands were also rich in minerals. Obsidian volcanic glass, sharp as any blade, was prized for tools, weapons, and ceremonial objects. Jade, cool to the touch and deep green like jungle leaves after rain, was carved into beads, masks, and offerings for the gods. It was from these heights that much of the Maya's trade wealth flowed. Goods moved along narrow paths, carried by porters with strong backs and sure feet. They traveled from city to city. Their journeys measured not in hours, but in days. And sometimes in weeks. The coasts. Where the land met the Caribbean. The Maya built fishing villages and trading ports. The sea was a road. Its waves carrying canoes laden with salt, dried fish, shells, and cotton cloth. These ports connected the Maya to distant peoples, linking them to trade networks that stretched far beyond their own lands. The salty wind carried scents from distant shores. Spices, resins, and even strange feathers that came from birds no one had ever seen inland. Along the beaches, the air was bright with sunlight. And the crash of waves was a constant song. Living with the land. Wherever they lived. Lowland jungle, highland slope, or coastal lagoon. The Maya saw the land not as a resource to be taken, but as a sacred partner. Mountains were not simply tall rocks. They were the homes of spirits. Caves were not empty voids. They were the mouths of the underworld. Places of mystery and power. Trees, rivers, even stones were part of the great web of life. The people's days began with the sun. At dawn, the eastern sky would pale. Then blaze with orange and gold as the sun climbed over the horizon. Farmers would step into their fields. Their tools made of wood and stone. And work until the heat of midday drove them to shade. Children fetched water from nearby wells or streams, balancing jars on their heads with easy grace. Artisans sat in the shade, chiseling stone, shaping clay, or weaving cotton on backstrap looms. In the afternoons, the air would often grow heavy, and the sky would darken with clouds. Rain would sweep through, sudden and strong, drumming on leaves and roofs, cooling the earth before vanishing as quickly as it came. At night, the world changed. The forest stirred with new voices. Owls calling from high branches. Frogs singing from the water's edge. And the rustle of unseen animals moving through the undergrowth. The stars appeared. And the great arc of the Milky Way stretched across the sky. A river of light mirrored by the rivers below. The people. The Maya were not one single nation, but many. A constellation of city-states. Each with its own rulers, nobles, farmers, and artisans. Yet no matter where they lived, they shared certain threads of culture. They spoke related languages. Traded along the same roads. Worshipped gods who often wore different names but shared familiar faces. Festivals brought people together, drawing villagers to great cities where plazas filled with music, dancers in bright costumes, and the sweet smell of roasted maize and cacao. Daily life was simple in its rhythm, but rich in its meaning. Clothing was made from woven cotton, dyed in colors drawn from plants, insects, and minerals. Men often wore tunics and loincloths. Women wore long woven dresses called huppals, embroidered with patterns that spoke of their village and family. Jewelry was common. Not the heavy gold of distant empires, but jade, shell, and carved bone. Each piece carrying its own meaning. A green jade bead might be a symbol of life and renewal. A shell pendant could be a reminder of the sea's bounty. Food was both nourishment and ritual. Maize was ground into dough to make tortillas and tamales. Beans were boiled into hearty stews. And cacao was whisked into a frothy drink flavored with chili and honey. Meals were often eaten together, shared between family and neighbors. The day's work and the day's stories mingling in the evening air. In the Maya world, land and people were threads in the same cloth. You could not pull one without touching the other. The earth shaped the people. And the people shaped the earth. With care, with respect. And with the understanding that every harvest, every stone placed in a wall, every drop of water drawn from a cenote, was part of a balance that had to be kept. As the night deepens around you, you can almost hear that balance in the hush of the jungle. A quiet heartbeat that has been steady for thousands of years. The origins. Long before the Maya built their soaring temples and carved their intricate glyphs, the land they would one day rule was home to small, scattered communities. The air was still thick with the same jungle scents. The same hum of insects and calls of distant birds. But life was simpler then, quieter, though no less rich. It began, as so many great stories do, with the land and its gifts. Around 3,000 years ago, in the forests and open plains of what we now call Mesoamerica, families settled near rivers and fertile ground. They planted maize, a plant so central to their survival that it would become the very foundation of their myths. Alongside it grew beans and squash, a perfect trio that nourished both body and soil. The beans climbed the tall stalks of the maize, and the squash spread broad leaves across the earth, keeping the soil cool and moist beneath the tropical sun. These early farmers built their homes from materials close at hand. Walls of wattle and daub, roofs of palm leaves. Floors swept smooth and clean. Villages were small, often just a cluster of families. Their lives are shaped by the rise and fall of the seasons. From villages to communities. Over generations, the villages grew. Paths between them became well-trodden, as people traded food, tools, and knowledge. They began to gather for more than just trade. For ceremonies, for shared planting and harvest. For celebrations that honored the forces they believed governed the world. They told stories by firelight, of gods who shaped the earth from the bones of the previous world. Of the maize god who brought life to the people. Of the sun's endless journey across the sky. These stories were not entertainment alone. They were instruction, memory, and identity. Passed carefully from one generation to the next. The people learned to read the land more closely. They watched the stars, noticing how certain constellations rose just before the planting season, and faded when it was time to harvest. They measured the shadow of the sun across the ground, marking the days when it stood directly overhead. The rhythms of the sky became the rhythms of their lives. The first steps toward cities. As the centuries passed, some villages began to stand out. Perhaps it was their position near fertile fields, or a sacred site that drew pilgrims from afar, or the skill of their artisans in shaping jade and obsidian. Whatever the reason, these villages attracted more people, and the settlements grew larger. Small temples appeared. Not the towering stone pyramids we think of today, but simple platforms of earth and wood, raised above the ground to bring the people closer to their gods. These early ceremonial centers were places of both faith and governance. Here, leaders organized planting and harvest schedules, resolved disputes, and led rituals that bound the community together. Trade networks expanded. Salt from the coasts, obsidian from volcanic highlands, and rare feathers from distant forests moved from hand to hand, carried by travelers who walked for days along forest paths and riverbanks. The influence of neighbors. The Maya were not alone in their rise. To the west, the great city of Olmec flourished along the Gulf Coast. The Olmec carved colossal heads from stone, practiced ritual ballgames, and left behind symbols that may have inspired later writing systems. Through trade and contact, the Maya inherited not just goods, but ideas about governance, religion, and the sacred nature of time. This exchange of ideas planted seeds that would grow into the distinctive Maya civilization. They adapted what they learned to their own environment, their own gods, their own sense of the world. Building in stone. By the pre-classical period around 1000 BCE to 250 CE, some Maya centers had begun to be built in stone. At first, these were modest structures, but they marked an important change. Stone lasted. Stone declared permanence. It told every traveler and every generation to come, "We are here, and we will remain." The ceremonial plazas grew larger, and stepped platforms rose higher. Carved steely tall stone monuments appeared, bearing images of rulers, gods, and symbols that hinted at a written language. The rise of kings and priests. With larger cities came more complex leadership. No longer was a village guided by a single elder or council. Now there were kings. Men who claimed descent from the gods. Whose right to rule was written into the very fabric of the cosmos. Alongside them stood the priests. Keepers of time and ceremony. They were astronomers. Tracking the paths of Venus and the moon. Mathematicians. Calculating the cycles of planting and festival. And historians. Recording events in glyphs so they would not be forgotten. This partnership of kings and priests bound religion, politics, and daily life into one seamless whole. To plant crops was a sacred act. To build a pyramid was to recreate the sacred mountain of creation. To wage war was to fulfill divine will. The first great cities. By the 1st century CE, cities like Nabe, El Mirador, and Tikal began to rise in the lowlands. El Mirador, in particular, boasted massive pyramids. Its central temple soaring above the canopy. These cities were not mere clusters of homes. They were carefully planned centers of life. With wide plazas, ceremonial causeways, and temples aligned to the sun and stars. The population grew. Markets bustled with goods from near and far. Artisans honed their crafts. Pottery painted with delicate scenes. Jade beads polished to a soft shine. Featherwork shimmering in the light. A civilization takes shape. It is here, in these centuries, that the Maya became the civilization we think of today. They had their own written language. A complex system of glyphs that could record anything from royal decrees to the myths of creation. They had a calendar of astonishing accuracy, measuring not only the solar year but the sacred 260-day cycle that wove through every aspect of their lives. They had architecture that reached toward the heavens, mathematics that embraced the concept of zero, and a worldview that tied human fate to the movements of the cosmos. The scattered villages of their ancestors were now threads in a vast and intricate web. A network of city-states bound together by trade, shared beliefs, and the enduring presence of the land and sky. The jungle you walk through now feels different when you think of these beginnings. You can imagine the first villagers clearing a small patch of forest. The first traders setting out along a muddy path with goods to exchange. The first priest marking the rising of a star and smiling, knowing it was time to begin the planting. The Maya had not yet reached their golden age. That would come in the centuries ahead. But their roots were strong. And their vision of the world was already as deep as the cenotes. And as vast as the Milky Way above. Daily life and society. The world of the Maya was not only the great temples and plazas we see today. It was also the quiet hum of daily life, the rhythm of mornings and evenings. Of meals prepared, tools shaped, children's laughter, and market chatter. Behind the grandeur of the kings and priests, there was the steady heartbeat of ordinary people, whose hands and minds built and sustained this civilization. Imagine waking in a Maya home. Not in a stone palace, but in a modest thatched dwelling. The kind most families lived in. Morning in a Maya village. The first light filters through the woven reeds of the walls. Outside, the forest is already awake. Birds calling to one another. The rustle of leaves in the morning breeze. And somewhere in the distance, the bark of a dog. The air is cool now. But the heat of the day will come quickly. You rise from your bed, a simple wooden frame or a woven mat laid on the earthen floor, and step outside into the soft glow of dawn. The sky in the east is a canvas of pale gold, deepening to orange and then pink as the sun edges higher. Smoke drifts lazily from cooking fires, and the scent of roasting maize drifts on the air. In one corner of the courtyard, a woman kneels beside a flat stone, grinding maize kernels into a fine dough called masa. Her rhythm is steady, the stone roller moving back and forth with a sound like a soft heartbeat. Nearby, another woman shapes the dough into thin discs and lays them on a clay griddle over the fire. The tortillas puff and darken, filling the air with a warm, nutty aroma. A clay pot simmers beside the griddle. Inside, beans bubble gently, flavored with herbs and a hint of chili. In another pot, cacao is being prepared. The beans ground into a paste, mixed with water, and whisked into a frothy drink. For the Maya, cacao was more than refreshment. It was a sacred gift from the gods. Clothing and adornment. As the village stirs to life, people dress for the day's work. Men tie on simple cotton loincloths or short tunics, their hair bound back with woven bands. Women wrap themselves in hupels, loose, hand-woven dresses adorned with colorful embroidery at the neck and hem. The dyes come from nature. Deep reds from the cochineal insect, indigo from the anil plant, yellows from marigold petals. Patterns are more than decoration. They tell where a woman comes from, sometimes even her family lineage. Jewelry is worn by all, though its materials vary. A farmer might have a necklace of carved bone or shell, while a noble might wear jade pendants that gleam softly in the sun. Ears are often pierced and stretched to hold decorative plugs, and hair is carefully braided or tied in styles that mark age and status. The rhythm of work. The day's labor begins early. Farmers head out to the milpas, the fields where maize, beans, and squash grow together. They carry digging sticks, simple yet effective tools that have fed generations. The work is rhythmic, guided by the arc of the sun and the call of birds overhead. In the village, potters sit at low benches, their hands shaping clay into bowls, jars, and incense burners. They smooth the surfaces with river stones, then leave the vessels to dry before firing them in open pits. Weavers sit with backstrap looms anchored to nearby trees, the wooden bars resting against their hips. They pass the shuttle back and forth, thread by thread, until bright patterns emerge in the cloth. Diamonds, zigzags, and stylized flowers that have been woven for centuries. Children help where they can. The youngest carry water from nearby wells or streams, balancing jars on their heads with perfect balance. Older children gather firewood, tend small gardens, or watch the family's turkeys and dogs. Clothing and adornment. As the village stirs to life, people dress for the day's work. Men tie on simple cotton loincloths or short tunics, their hair bound back with woven bands. Women wrap themselves in hupels, loose, hand-woven dresses adorned with colorful embroidery at the neck and hem. The dyes come from nature. Deep reds from the cochineal insect, indigo from the anil plant, yellows from marigold petals. Patterns are more than decoration. They tell where a woman comes from, sometimes even her family lineage. Jewelry is worn by all, though its materials vary. A farmer might have a necklace of carved bone or shell, while a noble might wear jade pendants that gleam softly in the sun. Ears are often pierced and stretched to hold decorative plugs, and hair is carefully braided or tied in styles that mark age and status. The rhythm of work. The day's labor begins early. Farmers head out to the milpas, the fields where maize, beans, and squash grow together. They carry digging sticks, simple yet effective tools that have fed generations. The work is rhythmic, guided by the arc of the sun and the call of birds overhead. In the village, potters sit at low benches, their hands shaping clay into bowls, jars, and incense burners. They smooth the surfaces with river stones, then leave the vessels to dry before firing them in open pits. Weavers sit with backstrap looms anchored to nearby trees, the wooden bars resting against their hips. They pass the shuttle back and forth, thread by thread, until bright patterns emerge in the cloth. Diamonds, zigzags, and stylized flowers that have been woven for centuries. Children help where they can. The youngest carry water from nearby wells or streams, balancing jars on their heads with perfect balance. Older children gather firewood, tend small gardens, or watch the family's turkeys and dogs. Art and architecture. The cities of the Maya were not just places to live. They were living works of art, woven into the jungle as if the stones themselves had grown there. To walk among them, even now, is to feel the quiet hum of an ancient heartbeat beneath your feet. The temples rise like mountains of human creation, their steps steep and precise, leading to sanctuaries where the world of the living met the realm of the gods. Palaces spread out in graceful courtyards, where the scent of incense once drifted through shaded halls. Stone stelae stand in rows, their surfaces carved with intricate patterns of glyphs and figures, telling stories of kings, battles, alliances, and the turning of the sacred calendar. The city as a cosmic map. The Maya did not build haphazardly. Every stone, every alignment, was placed with care, in harmony with the sky above and the earth below. The city was a mirror of the cosmos. Temples often faced the sunrise on important days of the year. The equinoxes, when night and day are equal. The solstices, when the sun reaches its farthest point north or south. From certain doorways, the sun would appear to rise directly over a distant peak, or set between two carved pillars, marking the passage of sacred time. Plazas were arranged as stages for ritual. Wide open spaces where the people gathered to watch processions, to hear the words of their rulers, and to witness ceremonies that bound the human and divine worlds together. Pyramids and temples. The Great Pyramids dominate the skyline, their steps rising sharply to the temple at the top. These temples were not vast halls for the public. They were small, intimate sanctuaries, reserved for priests and kings to commune with the gods. Climbing one in the soft light of dawn, you would feel the stones cool beneath your hands, the jungle mist curling around you. As you reach the summit, the view unfolds. A sea of green treetops stretching to the horizon, broken here and there by the pale shapes of other pyramids. The walls inside are painted with vibrant murals, scenes of myth and history. Priests in feathered headdresses, warriors with painted faces, gods emerging from flowers or clouds of smoke. The colors are deep and luminous. Reds from hematite, blues from the rare Maya blue pigment, yellows from ground minerals. Palaces and courtyards. If the temples were the city's mountains, the palaces were its flowing rivers, built around shaded courtyards. They offered cool respite from the heat. Stone benches lined the walls, and colonnades opened to gardens where birds sang in the midday shade. Here the nobles lived, conducting the daily affairs of the city. Scribes sat cross-legged in small chambers, ink pots beside them, brushes ready to record decrees and histories on folded bark paper codices. Water flowed through the palaces too, sometimes carried in by hand, sometimes guided through carved channels from nearby reservoirs. The ball courts. In almost every major city, you would find the ball court. A long, narrow playing field flanked by high stone walls. Here, the sacred ball game was played. A contest that was part sport, part ritual, and sometimes, part sacrifice. The players struck the heavy rubber ball with their hips, trying to send it through stone rings high on the walls. The game echoed with shouts, the thud of the ball, and the murmur of the crowd. To the Maya, the ball game symbolized the struggle between life and death, the movement of the sun, and the eternal cycle of creation and destruction. Carvings around the court often show players wearing elaborate gear. Padded belts, knee guards, and headdresses that mark them as participants in something far more profound than a mere game. Sculpture and carving. The Maya were master sculptors. Stone, wood, bone, and shell were transformed into objects of both beauty and meaning. The steely tall, upright slabs of stone are covered with glyphs and figures so detailed that you can almost feel the texture of cloth, the curve of a feather, or the gleam of a jewel. Door lintels carved from hardwood depict rulers seated on thrones, receiving emissaries or speaking with gods. Even everyday objects, a cup, a spindle, a knife handle, might bear fine incised designs, turning the mundane into something beautiful. Jade was especially treasured. Its deep green color was linked to maize, to life, to the very breath of the gods. A single jade bead could be a precious heirloom, passed down through generations. Murals and color. Though we often see Maya cities as bare stone today, in their time they were alive with color. Buildings were plastered and painted in bright hues. Reds, yellows, blues, whites, each with symbolic meaning. Murals covered entire walls, showing scenes of feasts, of markets, ceremonies. Some depict the world of the gods, others the daily life of the people. They were visual stories, meant to be read as much as admired. The sense of presence. To stand in a Maya city at its height would be to stand in the center of a living work of art. The sunlight glinting on painted walls, the cool shade of colonnades, the murmur of fountains, the smell of incense and flowers. All these would weave together into a tapestry of sound, scent, and sight. Even in ruins, these places still breathe. Roots embrace the stones. Birds nest in the high corners. And the air seems to carry echoes of footsteps, voices, and the deep hum of drums from long ago. Knowledge and astronomy. The Maya world was not only built from stone and earth. It was built from ideas. Beneath the grandeur of their cities, beneath the weight of their history, there flowed an invisible current. Knowledge. For the Maya, knowledge was sacred. It was a thread connecting the living with the gods, and the gods with the cosmos itself. To know was not merely to remember. It was to hold a fragment of the universe in one's hands. The sacred calendar. Among the most remarkable of their achievements was their mastery of time. The Maya did not count days as we do, one after another in an unbroken chain. They saw time as a set of interlocking wheels, each turning in its own rhythm, each aligning in patterns of great significance. They had not one calendar, but several. The Tzolk'in, a 260-day cycle, was the sacred calendar, used to mark the timing of ceremonies, to name children, and to interpret the flow of fate. The Hab, a 365-day solar calendar, tracked the turning of the seasons, the planting and harvesting of maize, the arrival of rains, the coming of dry winds. Every 52 Hab years, about the span of 2 human generations, the two calendars aligned in a great calendar round. These moments were charged with power, as though the universe itself had paused to take a breath. To keep these calendars was the work of scribes and priests, men and women who studied the cycles of the heavens, with a dedication that spanned lifetimes. A single miscount could mean a ceremony performed on the wrong day, and thus a world slightly out of balance. Numbers and the infinite. The Maya also developed one of the most sophisticated number systems in the ancient world. They used a vigesimal system based on the number 20, which may have arisen from counting on both fingers and toes, with only 3 symbols: a dot for 1, a bar for 5, and a shell for 0. They could write numbers of any size. That shell symbol for zero is especially significant. While many ancient cultures struggled with the concept, the Maya embraced it fully, making them among the first in the world to use a true zero in their mathematics. It allowed them to measure time on vast scales, millions of days into the past or future, and to keep perfect order in their complex calendrical calculations. Astronomers of the jungle. The night sky above the Maya lands was a deep, velvet ocean scattered with brilliant stars. Without the haze of modern lights, every movement of the heavens was visible. And the Maya watched it all with unwavering attention. They built observatories. Not the domed glass structures of today, but stone towers and aligned platforms, from which the rising of Venus, the path of the moon, and the journey of the sun could be tracked with astonishing precision. Venus, in particular, held deep meaning. Its cycles were tied to warfare, to the reigns of kings, and to the balance between life and death. Maya astronomers. The moon's phases were equally important, shaping agricultural rhythms and ritual timings. Solar and lunar eclipses were understood not as random events, but as moments when the cosmic order required careful tending. Knowledge as power. This mastery of time and space was not just for curiosity. It was power. A ruler who could predict the exact day of an eclipse, or announce the arrival of Venus before it was visible, seemed to hold the very keys of the universe. Such knowledge reinforced the ruler's sacred role. It showed that the king or queen was not only a leader of the people, but a bridge between the earthly and the divine. The written word. To preserve and pass on this knowledge, Maya developed one of the most complex writing systems in the ancient world. Their script was a mixture of logogram signs for whole words and syllabic signs, allowing them to write the full range of their spoken language. The scribes painted their texts on long sheets of bark paper, coated with a smooth white plaster, and folded into screen-like books called codices. Others they carved into stone or wood, ensuring their words could endure the centuries. Sadly, most of these codices were lost, destroyed in the fires of conquest. Only a few survive, precious fragments of a vast library of thought. Yet from what remains, we glimpse their maps of the heavens, their tables of Venus's path, their counts of days and nights stretching into deep time. The living classroom. But not all knowledge was written. Much of it lived in the minds of elders, passed through the spoken word, through teaching by example. A young apprentice astronomer might spend years learning how to watch the sky, how to record the slow drift of a constellation across seasons, how to compare that movement to the planting of maize, or the migration of birds. A healer might memorize hundreds of plant names, the right time to harvest each, the proper way to prepare them. Knowledge woven from centuries of patient observation. In this way, knowledge was never static. It moved like water, from teacher to student, from one generation to the next, always adapting, always flowing, time without end. To the Maya, the past and the future were not separate from the present. Time was cyclical. What had happened before would happen again. The end of a cycle was not the end of the world, but the turning of a great wheel. In their long count calendar, they could date events thousands of years in the past, and far into the future. It was a vision of time vast enough to hold the rise and fall of civilizations, the birth and death of stars. And through it all, the Maya stood beneath the endless sky, counting, measuring, remembering, holding in their minds the great story of the cosmos. Religion and the sacred world. In the Maya world, the sacred was never far away. It was not confined to temples or special days. It lived in every stone, in every drop of rain, in every breath of wind that moved through the jungle canopy. For the Maya, the cosmos was alive. The earth was a great living body. Its mountains the bones. Its rivers the veins. Its forests the skin and hair. And its breath carried on the shifting clouds above. The three realms. They believed the universe was divided into three interconnected realms. The upper world. A radiant expanse above. Home to gods of the sun, moon, and stars. To divine ancestors. And to celestial serpents who swam across the sky. The middle world. The earthly plane where humans lived. Rich with forests, fields, and cities. But also with sacred mountains, caves, and waters that acted as portals to other realms. The underworld, or Xibalba. A vast, shadowed place beneath the earth. Not simply a place of punishment, but a domain of challenge and transformation. Ruled by powerful gods who tested the souls of the dead, before allowing them to move on in the eternal cycle. These three realms were connected by the world tree. A vast ceiba. Its roots plunging into the underworld. Its trunk in the middle world. Its branches reaching the heavens. Every temple pyramid the Maya built was a symbolic world tree, linking earth and sky, human and divine. The gods among them. The Maya pantheon was vast and varied. Some gods were creators, shaping the world from the void. Others governed elements of nature. Rain, maize, wind, sun. Still others oversaw more mysterious aspects of existence. Time, death, dreams, and the weaving of fate. There was Itzamna, the great creator and god of wisdom, who gave writing and knowledge to the people. Chak, the rain god, whose lightning axe split the clouds, sending life-giving water down to the fields. Farmers prayed to Chak before planting, and thanked him when the maize stood tall and green. The hero twins, Hunahpu and Xbalanque, whose trials in the underworld formed one of the central epics of Maya mythology, were both tricksters and saviors, teaching lessons about courage, wit, and the inevitability of renewal. And there was the maize god, beautiful and ever-renewing, whose life mirrored the cycle of planting, growth, harvest, and rebirth. His story was a reminder that life is sustained by sacrifice, that the seed must die to sprout again. Sacred places. To the Maya, the landscape itself was sacred scripture. A cave was not simply a hollow in the earth. It was the mouth of Xibalba, an entrance to the underworld. A mountain was not only stone and soil. It was a cosmic pillar, one of the supports of the sky. Cenotes, the deep, water-filled sinkholes of the Yucatan, were portals to the spirit world. Places where offerings were given to the gods of rain and fertility. Archaeologists have found in their depths jade beads, carved figurines, and even the bones of those sacrificed in solemn rituals to keep the balance between realms. The rhythm of ritual. Religion was not separate from daily life. It was the calendar's heartbeat, the reason for gathering, the way the world was kept in harmony. There were great public ceremonies in the plazas, with processions of dancers in bright feathers, their movements echoing the motions of the gods. There were smaller, more intimate offerings. A pinch of maize meal scattered on the ground. A cup of cacao poured out to honor the spirits. Music and incense filled the air at these rituals. Drums thudded like the earth's pulse. Flutes sang like the wind through the trees. And the sweet, heavy smoke of burning copal resin curled toward the heavens, carrying prayers with it. The role of sacrifice. For the Maya, sacrifice was not cruelty. It was a necessity. The gods had given life to humans. And humans, in turn, were bound to give back. Sometimes this meant the offering of food, flowers, or incense. At other times, it meant the offering of blood. The most precious substance. The very essence of life. Rulers would pierce their ears, tongues, or even genitals, to draw their own blood as an offering. The act was deeply personal. A direct communication with the gods. In more solemn moments, captives taken in war might be sacrificed. Their spirits sent to serve the gods. Their deaths ensure the renewal of cosmic order. Myths that shaped the world. The Maya creation story, as preserved in the Popol Vuh, tells of gods who shaped humans from maize dough. After failed attempts with mud and wood. Maize was not just sustenance. It was the material of humanity itself. Every bite of food was, in a way, a reminder of origin. The hero twins' journey through the underworld. Their games with the lords of death. Their eventual triumph and transformation into the sun and moon. Taught that even in the deepest darkness, renewal is possible. The ever-present sacred. Even in the simplest acts. Weaving a cloth, planting a seed. Telling a child a bedtime story. The sacred was there. The gods were never distant. They walked in the fields. Hid in the rivers. Looked down from the stars. For the Maya, to live was to participate in a sacred story. That had neither true beginning nor end. Daily life in the cities. Morning begins slowly in the great Maya city. The sky is still painted with the last brushstrokes of night. The deep blues softening into pale gold. From high above the central plaza, the sun begins to glance off the white stone of the temples, making them glow as if lit from within. The city wakes not all at once, but in a kind of rolling wave. First the faint sound of footsteps in the courtyards. Then the calls of merchants setting out their goods. Then the deeper thud of drums announcing that the day has begun. The streets and plazas. From the base of a pyramid, you can see the city stretching outward in every direction. Wide plazas open into narrow streets. And those streets lead to clusters of houses, workshops, and gardens. The ground beneath your feet is a patchwork of limestone paving, worn smooth by decades of footsteps. Here and there, the air carries the scent of smoke from hearth fires, mingling with the fragrance of fresh tortillas, and the sharper scent of crushed herbs. In the central marketplace, long rows of stalls overflow with color. Vendors call out their offerings. Brightly dyed cotton cloth, polished obsidian blades, baskets of maize and beans, necklaces strung with jade and shells. You hear laughter from a group of children, darting between the legs of shoppers, playing a chasing game that weaves through the crowd like a living thread. Homes and neighborhoods. The homes of the common people are made of wattle and daub. Their walls were plastered smooth and painted with earthy reds and yellows. Thatched roofs slope steeply to shed the rain. And each house has its own small plot for growing food or keeping animals. Inside, the air is cool and dim, filtered through woven reed mats that hang over the doorways. A family hearth rests in the center. Its ashes are still warm from the morning fire. In wealthier districts, stone houses rise 2 or even 3 stories high, with carved doorways and painted murals. Courtyards hold gardens shaded by fruit trees, and stone benches line the walls for visitors. The sound of work. The city hums with labor. Not loud or hurried, but constant and steady. In one corner, you hear the rhythmic grinding of maize on a metate, stone on stone, as women prepare dough for tortillas and tamales. In another, the sharp tapping of a stonemason's tools, as he shapes a limestone block for a new temple stair. Nearby, a potter's wheel spins slowly, the wet clay taking shape beneath skilled fingers. The air rings with the soft clink of jade being carved, the rasp of wood being smoothed, and the flutter of woven cloth as it's hung in the sun to dry. Food and the midday meal. By midday, the sun has climbed high and hot. Shadows shorten, and the people gather in shaded spaces to eat. A meal might be simple. Tortillas fresh from the fire, beans simmered with herbs, and perhaps a small piece of roasted turkey or fish. Cacao, whisked into a frothy, spiced drink, is passed between friends and family. For those with means, meals can be more elaborate. Tamales stuffed with vegetables and meats, sauces thickened with ground seeds, and fruits like papaya, guava, or mamey, brought in from distant farms. Afternoon life. The heat of the day encourages slower movement. Merchants tend their stalls in the shade. Children nap in hammocks, and scribes sit cross-legged on mats, painting glyphs onto strips of bark paper. In the training courts, young men practice the pak-tapak ball game. Their movements quick and precise, the heavy rubber ball thudding against their hips and thighs. The game is not only sport, but ritual. Sometimes played to settle disputes, sometimes in honor of the gods. Evening in the city. As the sun begins to lower, the city stirs again. Families return from the fields, carrying baskets of vegetables, bundles of firewood, and fresh water drawn from nearby cenotes. Fires are lit, their smoke curling into the orange glow of twilight. The smell of roasting maize drifts through the streets, mingling with the sound of laughter and song. In the plaza, musicians gather. Flutes, drums, and rattles blending into a gentle rhythm. Dancers step lightly, their shadows stretching long against the stones. And above it all, the temples glow again, this time in the fading light, their shapes turning dark against the star-filled sky. In the Maya city, life is not a rush toward something distant. It is a cycle, as steady as the moon's path above, as constant as the breath of the jungle. The ball game and rituals of play. In the heart of many Maya cities stood a place unlike any other. A great stone court, flanked by tall walls. Its shape is a long, narrow rectangle open to the sky. This was the Pak-Tapak court, the stage for a game that was far more than sport. The court itself. The court's walls were often decorated with carvings. Figures of players in elaborate headdresses. Gods watching from the sky. And serpents coiling along the stone as if alive. In some cities, stone rings jutted high on the walls, their openings just large enough for a ball to pass through. It was a target nearly impossible to hit. And doing so was a feat celebrated with shouts, drums, and song. The floor of the court was smooth and hard, built to echo the thud of the heavy rubber ball. Around the edges, steps rose up where spectators would sit. Nobles in ornate seats near the center. Common folk crowding higher up. All gathered under the same sky to witness the match. The game's rhythm. The players moved with precision and strength, keeping the ball in motion without ever using their hands or feet. Instead, they struck it with their hips, thighs, or forearms, guiding it through arcs of flight that seemed to bend the air. The ball was solid and heavy, and each strike carried the echo of years of practice. To watch a game was to feel its rhythm. The alternating bursts of speed and stillness. The quick breath before a leap. The sudden crash as the ball struck stone. More than sport. Yet Pak-Tapak was not only for entertainment. It was a thread in the fabric of Maya belief. The game echoed a story told in the Popol Vuh, the Maya book of creation, in which the hero twins played a ball game against the gods of the underworld. Their victory symbolized light triumphing over darkness. Life prevailing over death. Because of this, some games were sacred. They could mark the end of a great festival, seal an alliance between cities, or serve as a form of ritual sacrifice. In rare, solemn matches, the losing side or sometimes the winners might be offered to the gods. Their deaths seen not as punishment, but as a passage into divine favor. The social gathering. On ordinary days, the ball game brought people together. Merchants would set up stalls outside the court, selling roasted maize, cacao drinks, and woven bracelets in the colors of the teams. Children imitated their heroes in small, dusty alleys, playing with makeshift balls of cloth and resin. Older men and women gathered to exchange news, while traveling traders took the opportunity to strike deals. The court was not just a place for play, but a place where the pulse of the city could be felt in full training and discipline. For those who played at the highest level, training began young. Boys were taught balance, timing, and the art of reading an opponent's movement. They learned how to withstand the bruises of the heavy ball, how to twist mid-air to keep it in play, and how to remain calm under the gaze of hundreds of watching eyes. They wore protective gear, padded belts around the waist, arm guards, and knee guards. But even so, the game demanded toughness. To play pak-tapak was to earn respect. And the best players became local celebrities. Their names were remembered long after the match ended. Evening shadows on the court. As the day cooled, and the sun slipped behind the jungle canopy, the last matches of the day would be played. The crowd's cheers softened. The flutes and drums faded. And the court itself seemed to exhale, its stones cooling in the night air. When the players left, the court stood empty beneath the stars. But it never truly slept. For the Maya believed that the gods themselves might descend to play in the dark hours, their footsteps echoing faintly in the silence. In the Maya world, the ball game was a dance between earth and sky, between life and death, between the mortal and the divine. It was, and would always be, a reminder that play could be as sacred as prayer. Temples, gods, and sacred spaces. The Maya world was a tapestry of sacred places, woven from stone, earth, sky, and the whispered presence of the divine. Their cities were not merely centers of trade or governance. They were living maps of the cosmos. Every temple, every plaza, every stela carved in stone, was a thread in that vast design. The temples rising from the earth. In the soft light of dawn, temples rose above the mist like islands. Some were steep pyramids, their steps climbing sharply to the heavens. Others were broad platforms crowned by ceremonial halls. They were built in stages, each new layer resting upon the bones of the old, as if time itself were being folded into the stone. To climb such a temple was to move through layers of meaning. From the human realm at its base, through the middle world where rituals were performed, to the summit, a place closer to the gods. The Maya aligned many temples with celestial events. The rising sun at the solstice, the path of Venus, or the full moon's arc across the night sky. On those sacred days, the temple became a kind of bridge, linking the movements of the heavens to the lives of those who gathered below, the gods who walked among them. The Maya pantheon was vast and alive with personality. There was Kinichajah, the sun god, whose warmth brought the maize to life. Ninechel, goddess of the moon, fertility, and weaving, who watched over mothers and midwives. Chak, the rain god, whose laughter was thunder and whose footsteps were falling rain. Each god had many faces, appearing young in one tale, old and wise in another. sometimes gentle, sometimes fierce. To the Maya, the gods were not distant, but present in every breath of wind, every rustle of leaves, every drop of rain on thirsty soil. Rituals that shaped the year. The turning of the Maya calendar was marked by festivals that mingled joy and solemnity. There were days for planting, days for harvest, days when the gates between worlds seemed thinner, and the living and the dead might meet in the flicker of a torchlight. Offerings were made to honor the gods. Maize, cacao, copal incense whose sweet smoke rose like prayers into the air. Sometimes, a ruler would pierce their skin with obsidian, letting their blood fall onto bark paper, which was then burned so that the smoke might carry their sacrifice to the heavens. The sacred spaces beneath the earth. Not all temples rose toward the sky. Some sacred places lay hidden beneath the surface. Caves and cenotes. Deep pools of fresh water formed in limestone. To the Maya, these were portals to the underworld, the realm of gods and ancestors. Here, offerings were cast into the water. Jade beads, pottery, carved figures. And, in the most solemn of ceremonies, human lives given to the gods of rain and renewal. In the cool darkness of a cave, the air heavy with the scent of burning copal, priests chanted and drums echoed like heartbeats. Shadows from torchlight danced upon the walls, turning the carvings and paintings into living visions. Priests keepers of the sacred knowledge. Priests were guides between worlds. They knew the cycles of the heavens, the meanings of dreams, the proper words to speak when calling the gods. They could read the complex glyphs carved into stone, telling the history of kings, the dates of great battles, and the omens hidden in the stars. Their role was not only religious but deeply practical. They decided the timing of planting, the dates for diplomacy, and the moments when cities should prepare for war or peace. The experience of ceremony. For an ordinary person, to stand in a plaza on a festival day was to be surrounded by a tide of color and sound. Drums boomed like the heartbeat of the earth. Flutes sang in high, haunting tones. Dancers in feathered costumes moved in slow, deliberate steps, each gesture carrying meaning, each mask a story of gods or heroes. The air was thick with the scent of flowers and incense. And above it all, the towering face of the temple watched over the people, its stairway rising into the bright sky. The living temples. Even when the ceremonies ended, and the crowds drifted back to their homes, the temples did not sleep. They held the memory of each prayer, each drumbeat, each whispered name of the gods. For the Maya, these sacred spaces were never empty stone. They were alive, breathing with the life of the city, watching over its people, and standing as bridges between the world they could touch and the world they could only dream of. The shadows gathering. The golden age had been a season of abundance. Cities rose in the jungles like stone mountains, and the web of trade bound the Maya world into a single, pulsing heart. But even the most glorious dawn will one day see its light soften, its shadows lengthen. And for the Maya, the first whispers of change came quietly. So quietly, that many did not hear them at all. Subtle signs in the sky and soil. It began with the seasons. The rains, once as faithful as the turning of the calendar, grew uncertain. Some years the clouds came late, the maize withering in thirsty fields. Other years, the rains came in sudden, furious bursts, flooding the lowlands and washing away the crops. Farmers, so skilled at reading the land, noticed that the soil near the great cities was growing tired. Years of feeding a swelling population had drawn much from the earth, and it no longer gave as generously as before. The skies too, seemed to shift. Astronomer priests watched the heavens with quiet concern, marking omens in the movements of planets, and in the unusual dimming of certain stars. They spoke in hushed voices of cycles turning, of the balance between worlds beginning to tilt, the weight of ambition. The Golden Age had been fueled by rivalry as much as by trade. Great cities competed not only for resources, but for glory, for the right to stand as the supreme heart of the Maya world. In the courts of kings, alliances were made and broken like pottery shards. A marriage meant to unite two dynasties could sour into bitter feud within a generation. Wars, once fought in ritualized displays, grew longer and more costly. The warriors returned from these campaigns with fewer captives, fewer spoils, and heavier burdens upon the people who fed and armed them. Whispers in the markets. The markets, once rich with goods from distant lands, began to show gaps. A merchant's stall might be missing the rare jade ornaments that had been so common in earlier years. Salt, carried inland from the coasts, rose in price as some routes became dangerous. The reasons were many. Bandits along trade paths, cities turning inward and guarding their resources, and the slow, creeping breakdown of the trust that had long kept the network alive. Travelers spoke of cities where hunger gnawed at the edges of daily life, where once proud plazas grew quiet. Their stalls are empty. The people's unease. For the common people, life still went on. Fields were planted. Children learned to weave and hunt. And festivals lit the nights with music and fire. But in the pauses between songs, in the stillness after the last drumbeat, there was a feeling, like a change in the wind before a storm. Some villages began to send more offerings to the gods, hoping to restore the balance. Others built new shrines, calling upon different deities, or mixing old ways with new. The priesthood, once united in purpose, found itself divided over how best to read the omens. One faction argued for more elaborate sacrifices, another for more focus on civic rebuilding. Both feared the same thing: a loss of the divine favor that had blessed the Maya for centuries. Cracks in the foundations. In the great cities, the temples and palaces still shone in the sunlight. But beneath the beauty, cracks had begun to form. Some were literal. Stone blocks shifting under years of heavy rains and roots. And some were invisible, formed in the trust between ruler and people. Heavy tribute was demanded to fund wars and build monuments. For those far from the royal court, it became harder to see how these sacrifices benefited their daily lives. In distant villages, the authority of the great cities seemed less absolute. Some began to look to local leaders, rather than kings in faraway palaces. The slow turning of the wheel. The Maya believed in cycles. That time moved like the great gears of their calendars, turning endlessly, bringing seasons of rise and seasons of fall. Perhaps, they thought, this too was a cycle. But in the quiet spaces of their hearts, many feared that this turning was not the gentle passing of one era to the next, but the beginning of an ending. The sun still rose over the jungle. The market still rang with voices. And children still chased one another in the plazas. But in the air, there was a different kind of silence. One that waited, and watched, and grew. The long decline. The decline of the great Maya cities did not arrive like a sudden storm. It came like a slow twilight. The kind where the sun lingers just beyond the horizon. And each passing moment draws the world into a deeper shadow. In the plazas, in the fields, and in the jungle paths, life continued much as it had for generations. Yet, beneath the surface, something was shifting. A waning of plenty. For centuries, the Maya had coaxed the land into abundance. They had mastered the rhythm of planting and harvesting, moving between swidden plots and carefully managed fields. But in the heartlands near the great cities, the soil was growing thin. The lush fertility of the early centuries had been drawn out by constant cultivation. And the earth no longer answered as generously to the farmer's hand. To keep the cities fed, fields had to be cleared farther and farther from the urban centers. This meant longer journeys for farmers, more labor to carry crops back, and greater vulnerability to bandits or rival city-states. Along the trade paths, the forests, once so vast and untouched, were being steadily thinned. Trees fell not only to make space for crops, but to provide timber for construction and fuel for the lime kilns that baked the stone for temples and palaces. The scent of burning wood was as common as the scent of flowers. And in some regions, the canopy no longer stretched unbroken from horizon to horizon. Cities straining under their own weight. The great city-states had always been symbols of power, centers of learning, faith, and trade. But the larger they grew, the more they demanded from the surrounding countryside. Water systems needed constant upkeep. Reservoirs had to be cleaned, canals maintained. The population of some cities swelled beyond what their systems were originally designed to support. In dry seasons, the reservoirs ran low, and the smell of algae drifted across the plazas. In the humid lowlands, disease found easy purchase in crowded districts. Trade brought wealth, but it also brought illness from distant lands. A sickness that might fade quickly in a small village could spread far more easily in the winding alleys of a great city. Temples blazed with torchlight late into the night, their chants echoing into the dark jungle. But some people began to question quietly. If the gods truly heard them, why had they turned away? In certain regions, local cults and new forms of worship began to appear, drawing followers away from the central priesthood. The unity of belief, which had long bound the city-states together, was loosening. Abandonment of the great cities. The change came not in a single moment, but over the span of decades. In some cities, plazas that had once been filled with traders and dancers grew quiet. Walls crumbled, and vines began to creep across carved stone. The great ball courts fell silent, their painted lines fading beneath moss. In the highlands, some cities endured. Their cooler climate and richer soil gives them a longer life. But in the lowland heartlands, one after another, the great cities were left behind. Their temples rose like islands in a sea of green. As the jungle slowly reclaimed its own, people did not vanish entirely. They moved to smaller settlements, to regions where the land could still feed them, to places less touched by war. The Maya world shifted from a network of mighty urban centers to a more scattered tapestry of towns and villages. The echo that remained, even as the great cities fell silent, the Maya people endured. Their languages, their stories, their knowledge of the stars, all lived on, passed from elders to children, woven into the fabric of daily life. And though the monumental cities crumbled, the jungle held their memory. Stone stelae stood beneath the trees, their carvings softened by rain, but still whispering the names of kings and queens. The roots of ceiba trees wrapped around temple steps, their presence like a guardian's embrace. The long decline was not an end in the way we think of endings. It was a transformation, a shift from one way of life to another. And though the world the Maya had known was fading, its spirit would remain in the land. in the people, and in the stars above. The enduring legacy. The great temples may have crumbled, and the once bustling plazas may now lie silent beneath the green canopy. But the Maya did not vanish. Far from it. The essence of their civilization, its languages, traditions, and ways of seeing the world, remained like embers beneath the ashes, ready to glow whenever touched by memory. The living descendants. Today, in the hills and valleys of southern Mexico, in the highlands of Guatemala, in Belize, Honduras, and El Salvador, millions of Maya descendants live their lives much as their ancestors once did. In small villages, you can still hear the murmur of the ancient languages. Yucatec, Kich, Cachali, Mam, and many others. Spoken in the marketplace. Sung in lullabies. Whispered in prayer. Women still weave on the backstrap loom, just as their great-great-grandmothers did. The bright threads, dyed with natural colors, form patterns that carry meanings older than any living memory. Motifs that speak of mountains, rain, maize, and the sacred animals of the forest. In the mornings, men still walk to their milpas, the small fields where maize, beans, and squash grow together, just as they have for thousands of years. The soil is still turned by hand, the planting timed with the knowledge of the rains, and the harvest was celebrated with food, music, and prayer. The survival of language and story. Language is more than words. It is a way of thinking, a way of understanding the world. The Maya languages carry within them an echo of ancient ways of life, a rhythm that reflects the cycles of the earth and sky. In these languages, time is often described as something that surrounds and embraces, not as a straight line but as a circle, where the past, present, and future are threads woven together in a single cloth. The old stories still live in these tongues. Stories of the hero twins, who outwitted the lords of the underworld. Stories of the maize god, whose rebirth brought life to the people. Stories of the first dawn, when the gods shaped humans from corn dough, their bodies golden as the sunlit fields. Even in modern homes, these tales are told beside the fire at night. Children listening with wide eyes, their imaginations painting the scenes in the glow of the flames. The calendar that still marks the days. The Maya calendar was never just a system for counting days. It was a map of the universe, a way of aligning human life with the great cycles of the cosmos. In some Maya communities today, the sacred calendar Tzolk'in is still kept. Day keepers, trained from youth, know the meanings of each day's sign and number. They offer guidance for marriages, plantings, journeys, and ceremonies, ensuring that important events fall on days in harmony with the natural order. The Hab, the solar year, is still used to mark the agricultural cycle. When certain constellations rise just before dawn, farmers know it is time to prepare the fields. When the sun reaches its zenith with no shadow at noon, they know the rains will soon begin. Thus, even in the 21st century, the turning of the heavens still whispers to the people, as it did to their ancestors. Art and craft in continuity. The art of the ancient Maya. Their jade carvings, painted ceramics, and hieroglyphic inscriptions, was not merely decorative. It was a language of symbols, a way to speak to the gods and to the future. Today, that tradition continues in new forms. Potters in small villages still shape clay by hand, smoothing it with river stones, firing it in simple kilns. The patterns they paint may differ from those on ancient vessels, but they still carry the same attention to balance, color, and meaning. Weavers create textiles that rival the beauty of carved stele. Each hupel the traditional blouse, is a living manuscript. Its patterns telling who the wearer is, where she comes from, and the stories of her people. Even in wood carving, you can find echoes of ancient artistry. Masks for festivals, saints for churches, and animals for household altars. All carved with the same care, once given to the wooden lintels of temple doorways. The temples that stand as teachers. Many of the great Maya cities have been reclaimed from the jungle, their temples rising once again under the open sky. At Chichén Itzá, the pyramid of Kukulkan still marks the equinoxes, its stairways casting the shadow of a serpent that seems to descend from the heavens. At Tikal, the steep pyramids still pierce the canopy, offering a view that stretches to the horizon. A sea of green broken only by the sound of howler monkeys and the calls of toucans. These places are not silent ruins. They are classrooms, where archaeologists, historians, and Maya guides share the stories carved into the stones. Visitors walk the same plazas where ancient feet once trod, feeling, if only for a moment, the pulse of that world. The Maya spirit in modern life. In modern towns and cities across the Maya world, you will find a weaving of past and present. Catholic churches stand beside ancient ceremonial sites. Festivals blend indigenous dances with colonial processions. A single celebration might honor both a Christian saint and the old gods of rain and harvest. Markets are filled with both ancient and modern goods. Plastic buckets beside hand-woven baskets. Cell phones carried in embroidered cloth bags. Fresh tortillas sold next to bottled soda. The old and the new live side by side, not in conflict, but as parts of a single, living culture. A legacy that belongs to the world. The achievements of the ancient Maya. In astronomy, mathematics, architecture, and agriculture, are treasures not only of their descendants, but of all humanity. Their knowledge of the stars helped shape modern understandings of celestial motion. Their calendar, so precise, still impresses scientists today. Their agricultural techniques, like planting maize, beans, and squash together, are studied as models of sustainable farming. And perhaps most importantly, their resilience offers a lesson. The great cities may have fallen, but the people endured, adapting, preserving, and passing on the threads of their culture. Through centuries of change, the Maya story is not simply one of rise and fall. It is a story of transformation, of how a civilization's soul can live on, long after its monuments are claimed by the jungle. It is a reminder that the heart of a people is not found only in stone, but in the hands that plant the seeds, in the voices that tell the stories, and in the eyes that look to the stars with wonder. Under the same stars, night falls over the Maya world. In the highlands, the mountains fade into shadow, their slopes hidden under a blanket of mist. In the lowlands, the jungle breathes deeply, its chorus of insects and frogs rising into the warm, velvety air. Above it all, the stars emerge one by one, points of light scattered across the infinite black, just as they have for millennia. Long ago, Maya astronomers stood beneath these same stars, their eyes lifted in wonder. They charted the movements of planets, traced the paths of constellations, and wove the stories of gods and heroes into the fabric of the night sky. The constellations they named are still there. Orion's belt rising over the horizon. The Pleiades clustered like grains of maize. Venus glowing bright as the morning star. Even now, in villages where the old ways are kept, people still look to those same lights. For guidance, for omens, and for the quiet comfort of knowing that the universe is steady and eternal. The silence of the ancient cities. In the ruins of Tikal, temple steps lie cool under the moonlight. The plazas are empty now, but the wind still carries the scent of the ceiba tree, its roots anchored deep in the earth. At Chichén Itzá, the pyramid of Kukulkan rests in perfect stillness. The stone serpent sleeps in shadow, waiting for the sun to return and awaken it on the equinox. And in countless smaller sites, half hidden by the jungle, the remnants of walls and stele hold their vigil through the centuries. Under the same stars, night falls over the Maya world. In the highlands, the mountains fade into shadow, their slopes hidden under a blanket of mist. In the lowlands, the jungle breathes deeply, its chorus of insects and frogs rising into the warm, velvety air. Above it all, the stars emerge one by one, points of light scattered across the infinite black, just as they have for millennia. Long ago, Maya astronomers stood beneath these same stars, their eyes lifted in wonder. They charted the movements of planets, traced the paths of constellations, and wove the stories of gods and heroes into the fabric of the night sky. The constellations they named are still there. Orion's belt rising over the horizon, the Pleiades clustered like grains of maize, Venus glowing bright as the morning star. Even now, in villages where the old ways are kept, people still look to those same lights for guidance, for omens, and for the quiet comfort of knowing that the universe is steady and eternal. The silence of the ancient cities. In the ruins of Tikal, temple steps lie cool under the moonlight. The plazas are empty now, but the wind still carries the scent of the ceiba tree, its roots anchored deep in the earth. At Chichén Itzá, the pyramid of Kukulkan rests in perfect stillness. The stone serpent sleeps in shadow, waiting for the sun to return and awaken it on the equinox. And in countless smaller sites, half hidden by the jungle, the remnants of walls and stele hold their vigil through the centuries.